that. And we ask that you watch over our men and women in service and protection of our city, our state, and our country. I ask these things in your name. Amen.
Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. We have what appears to be a jam-packed agenda this evening, so we'll get right to it and move into communications. Mr. Robinson.
I would like to report that I have been in communication with Clackamas County on that building and permitting issue that I had mentioned to you at the last meeting. We're making progress. Scott Caulfield specifically and I have spoken on several occasions. They have a proposed plan of action. It is the county's perspective, and we are in agreement at this time that the city continuing to operate under the county's umbrella is not in fact a violation. We do have some contract terms that we'll have to iron out, but over the long haul we think we're in pretty good shape, and we'll get those taken care of hopefully by the state deadline of June 30th. If not, we should be able to get an extension without any problem.
So just as a refresher, again, that was the piece regarding cities and contracting with counties and the legality and whether that was appropriate to be doing.
Yes, and the focus was really on whether the building officials had the proper licensure, and for those cities and potentially counties that were contracting with private consultants to perform the building inspection and plan check services, a determination that in fact that contracting mechanism was not appropriate and did not meet the legal requirements imposed by the state.
I did have some conversation with Chair Bernard for Clackamas County here earlier this week about that, and it does sound like there might be some issue for some cities across the state that this could put them in a really tough situation. So I'm glad that we're not one of them.
Yeah, I think some cities that are barely getting by with building departments are going to find themselves out of business before this is done.
Okay. Well, thank you for that update. Anything else?
No.
Okay. It's our first opportunity for citizen input and community announcements. So if you wish to address the council on anything that's not on the agenda or make a community announcement, please fill out one of these great little yellow cards. It's back there on the podium. Make sure that our city recorder, Ms. Schaefer, gets it. I have none currently, so we'll just assume that you guys have all been announced and are good with where we're at. We'll move into mayor's business. Not a lot, just a couple of things. Give everybody an update from the last meeting. So had the Clackamas County Coordinating Committee meeting at the beginning of the month. Not too much on the agenda other than we have a retreat coming up at the end of June for the C4 members, so myself and Councilor Hensley. The county will be approaching staff about getting input on transportation system plan items for that retreat, because that's going to be a heavily focused, really mostly on transportation, and so probably about the projects, probably our top 3 projects that we're really working on here in the city, and then maybe the other top 3 that we might be really working on that we need to get county support and need them championing with us, much like the Arndt Road extension piece, and if there's anything else that we really want to get on their radar as well as the rest of the county. So that might be coming through you, Rick, here soon.
So that would actually be 3, using kind of general numbers, 3 city-specific projects and 3 projects that we believe will be beneficial to Canby that may be regional in nature.
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you. Much better stated than I did. So Thursday at the beginning of the month, first Thursday, we had was the National Day of Prayer, and we had the Mayor's Prayer Breakfast. I really want to thank Ray Keene of the Canby Center and Peter Durkee and a host of others that really put on a great breakfast. Chief Smith and I were the speakers for the for the breakfast, and the theme was about unity, and it was really, really well attended. We had almost 130 people in attendance, so it was a great event. Just to let the council know, I signed on for a support letter and Rick, you might be able to fill in the name or what the name of the project is, but they're currently doing a study on I-5 and the Boone Bridge piece. They're looking at trying to extend the lane from the South Wilsonville exit to the Canby exit to keep traffic better flowing. And so, though not necessarily within our city, we still wrote a letter of support for that because that directly impacts flow between Wilsonville and Aurora and on down. So just wanted you guys all to be aware of that. And then the highlight between this meeting and the last one was I had the opportunity to visit with the third graders of Trost Elementary. They were working on a city project, and the project was they were doing presentations about what they felt Canby needed. So they were working on their presentation skills and public speaking, and I think third grade's a great time to be working on those pieces. So they did a presentation, so that the items were, why does Canby need it? What would it cost? What would be the potential problems of getting this project off the ground? So I'm not going to get into the details, because I'm trying to work out maybe having a couple of those groups come and present to us as an opportunity. So there was some, we had two groups do sports park complex, one of which required they wanted water slides to the equivalent of think Wild Rivers down in Southern California with the big slides, and they thought it would be great at Legacy Park. Yes. One idea was for a garden park, which the idea was that to be able to fund the maintenance of the park, the tree sculptures within the park could be sold, and so they would just continually replenish the tree sculptures to be sold, and that would help fund the park. So some really fun, community college. My son's group wanted a Red Robin, so he's constantly talking about food, so that was no change there. So it was great. So I'll give more details if they don't end up coming to present, but it was a lot of fun. So that was my highlight between that. So we'll move into councilor comments and liaison reports. We're going to start at the other end of the table with Councilor Spoon. Or do you need time to think now that you walked in? Yeah.
Over here on my island. Thank you,
Yes.
Mr. Mayor. A couple of things. Number one, I will totally vote for Owen on his bottomless fries platform for Canby, so excellent work, Owen. CTV5, number one, if you watch the Planning Commission or City Council meetings via YouTube and the internet, you may have noticed, like me, that they stopped showing up on CTV5's YouTube page, and you can find them now on the City of Canby's YouTube page. So if you've been looking for them and you're not subscribed to both channels and that's how you view the meetings, just start looking at the City of Canby's YouTube page, because you can find them there now. They've also continued with their updates to HDV and getting HD and getting equipment for live television. We're going to be able to see that in the coming year from everything from sports games at the high school. They're working on getting the live TV equipment or a mobile unit so they can take it to the high school so we can televise live basketball games in addition to what we're doing with football games. And then also things like I think there's the goal this year is to do graduation live as well, and so I think there's a lot of opportunity there, and they're continuing to work with the high school in terms of getting high school students on board to do some volunteer hours to actually learn that through the career technical education program. So that's exciting. They've been promoting a community calendar and reader board, so they're trying to promote that. If you have community events or something going on, you can submit those to CTV5, and then they'll play between shows or whatever they're doing. So that's a good way for people to do anything from birthday wishes to an event that they're having. As many of you know, we've been working on a contract with Gordon Christensen since we lost Tony last fall, and the proposal was made, and I believe he accepted that he would be the interim manager now. So he's actually going to be an employee of CTV5. The communication can be more consistent, and then and while they work out what that job description looks like moving forward through the transition. So that's exciting. Bridging Cultures, the first picnic in the park is this Saturday, May 19th at 11:30 at Locust Street Park. So put that on your calendars. And then in terms of 4th of July, Jamie's still looking for volunteers. People can still be in touch with her about being a vendor. And then, of course, Chief Davis is still raising funds. If you appreciate, value, and enjoy the Canby Fireworks Show, I would encourage you to consider donating some money that direction. You can donate directly, I believe, at the fire station, and then you'll find little canisters that look like a firework everywhere throughout town, from Gwynn's Coffee Shop to Thriftway, and you can put donations directly there as well. That's all I have.
Great. Thank you very much. Council President Dale, how are you, sir?
Good. Mr. Mayor, sorry for my tardiness. A 3-hour trip home turned into a 4-hour thanks to traffic, which I'm sure you have a lot to say about. It was Portland traffic.
Oh, should I get on my soapbox on that one?
Oh, boy.
Not tonight.
But with
It's got
that,
a
Mr.
long
Mayor, the gift of time.
Oh, all right.
Thank you.
Perfect. Thank
Save
you,
it
sir.
for next time.
Councilor Hensley.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I will be brief as well. Thank you for the Mayor's Prayer Breakfast and the leaders that put that together. I've attended that I think all but 1 year that I've been on council, and I've seen the attendance grow every year, and it's just really great to see that happen. It's an excellent event, and thank you for doing that. Also participated in the first Friday of the year, so thank you to Jamie and on the Main Street program and getting all of those things organized. We're going to have a full summer of First Friday events that are going to be fun, so look for those. Traffic Safety Committee, or Traffic Safety Commission, I apologize, has sent a proposal and recommendation to the city administrator, and we'll probably be hearing about that in the coming weeks or months, regarding a 4-way stop at 2nd and Cedar over by the post office, which, in my opinion, would be very beneficial to the community. And Julie Collinson, I want to thank her for her time on this Traffic Safety Commission. She has submitted her resignation. She will not seek another term, so there is an opening on the Traffic Safety Commission. So we're a little north side heavy, so I personally would like to see another person from the south side apply. That's just my personal wish, so we can have a little more balance on that committee. And and I also, just tonight, attended Senator Olson's town hall. Got a lot of good information on the special session that's coming up and where the legislature is looking like going in the next session. So if you missed that tonight, I know he's having others in other communities in the district. So look at his website if you want to catch up on what's going on in the district. And that is all I have.
Great. Thank you. Councilor Parker.
Well, the one spot that I was able to attend that hasn't been mentioned so far was the Saturday market. And a lot more vendors, a lot more people, and a terrific guitarist that just really blended in with what was going on. So encourage people to drop by and bring $10 down and buy something. You know, you vote with your money in order to continue these type of things. Just one liaison report, and that's with the Heritage Commission. They had their Zion Cemetery cleanup last weekend. Big success, 19 volunteers from 7 organizations: American Legion, Rotary, Kiwanis, the Historical Society, Garden Club, the Heritage and Landmark Commission, along with the chair of the state's Oregon Commission on Historic Cemeteries. It's the first time that we've had participation from the Legion, Garden Club, and Rotary, and they were able to clean 75 markers out there at the cemetery. And that's it for me.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The Planning Commission had a full meeting on Monday. They had 3 land use applications, the first of which was Northwoods Phase 3, which was 20 more residential lots in the Northwoods area. The only real public comment and problems with that was that they had a minor amendment to the subdivision plan This is the, if you recall, the neighborhood where we had the problem with the two-story usage that was, I guess, technically not actually two-story, and it fit under the definition of 1.5 stories, if you know what that is. And so there's, some public comment about that, and some, I guess, interpretations and some things that, might raise our attention at some point in time, because it's, a little bit anti-common sense on that. And then there was a site and design review in the industrial park for Clark Products. I don't know exactly what they do, but it's the corner lot on Hazel Dell. They're going to be sharing driveways with their neighbors. Not much controversy didn't appear on that. There was nobody opposing anything. That sailed smoothly through. The other one was a partition on Ivy near Southwest 8th, which was a little bit more, some more commentary and a little more controversial. It was basically taking one lot that has all of its frontage on Ivy and splitting it into two, and there's going to be a driveway that goes behind, well, on the side of and behind the existing house, and it's a super tight fit. And so there was a lot of commentary on how, when there's only 12 feet between the side of the house and the property boundary, you can fit a 12-foot driveway in that exact space, and still the neighbor that was there was not happy about that, and I don't know whether we'll see that or not, but that's what took place. French Prairie Group met today, but it was about their Marion County emergency telecommunication system, and I did not get a chance to go, and they did results of the primary election, which I will go into.
Okay. Thank you, sir. All right. Yes.
I actually forgot to mention something I wanted to bring up. If that's okay.
Sure.
I actually shared it on my city council or Facebook page, and in case you haven't seen it, I wanted to call your attention to a heritage item that's going on this weekend. From Sunday, May 20th, from 4 to 6 p.m., the Mark Prairie Schoolhouse is having an open house. You can tour the grounds in a circa 1900 schoolhouse. And reading from the post, it says, nearly 70 years ago, when the Mark Prairie School merged with Canby Schools, the neighbors organized the Mark Prairie Community Club. In that time from then till now, the numbers, of course, like a lot of organizations, are kind of dwindling. So in an effort to have some proposals on how to preserve this piece of our heritage, they're having an open house. So if you're interested in that, I mean, we've lost the Gribble Barn and other significant pieces of our heritage in our area. So if you're interested in learning more about that, the open house is this Sunday from 4 to 6 p.m., 7528 South Mark Road in Canby. So wanted to bring that to your attention.
What was the address again?
7528 South Mark Road.
Thank
It's the Mark Prairie Schoolhouse. I think maybe Carol Palmer should attend.
And Mr. Mayor, before we go on, I saw the chief in the back. I didn't give him the chance to speak. They haven't had a board meeting lately, so I don't have any updates. Chief, was there anything? Okay.
So that means there was a lot talked about, you just don't want to share it? Yeah.
That's great.
Thanks, Chief. All right, we will move into the consent agenda.
Mr. Mayor, I move to adopt the minutes of the April 25th, 2018 City Council Work Session, the minutes of the May 2nd, 2018 City Council Work Session, and the regular meeting, and an appointment of Jennifer Trundy to the City Budget Committee for a term to end on June 30th, 2019. Second.
Motion has been made by Councilor Hensley and seconded by Councilor Spoon to approve the consent agenda, which include the adoption of the minutes of the April 25th, 2018 City Council Work Session, minutes of the May 2nd, 2018 City Council Work Session and regular meeting, and appointment of Jennifer Trundy to the City Budget Committee for a term to end on June 30th, 2019. Any other comments or questions? No? All those in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? We're short, so that passes 5-0. Thank you, sir. Speaking, since we brought up the budget piece, we have completed 2 of 3 city budget meetings. So the next one is tomorrow evening in this very room from 6 until whenever the budget committee can't see straight anymore. And so, yeah, if you are interested in the city budget, it's on the city's website. So please take a look at it and feel free come down and hear the conversation, and I think that'll be in front of us for, public hearing and whatnot here at the end of
It will.
June. So, great. We'll move into public hearings this evening. The first one is the update to the master fee schedule. Yeah, is that what we've got, Kim? Perfect. So, I'm sorry, Joe, is that my legislative public hearing format, sir?
Yes.
A lot of build-up there, Joe, thanks. All right, so the matter presently before the hearing body requires a public hearing. All interested persons in attendance shall be heard on the matter. If you wish to testify on this matter, please fill out a yellow public testimony card and give it to the city recorder. At the appropriate time, please step forward to the microphone, state your name and interest in the matter. Those people that are interested in testifying as either proponents or opponents, please indicate your desire to speak by raising your hand at this time. I have no yellow cards unless there's... No? Okay. For longer presentations, proponents and opponents may buy time from one another. In so doing, those either in favor or opposed may allocate their time to a spokesperson who will represent the entire group. All questions must be directed through the mayor. Any evidence to be considered must be submitted to the hearing body for public access. All written testimony received both for and against shall be summarized by staff and presented briefly to the hearing body during the staff report. The public hearing will be conducted as follows. There will be the staff report. Questions, if any, by the hearing body or staff. I will open the public hearing for testimony. We'll hear from proponents for not more than 3 minutes each, and opponents not more than 3 minutes each. Close the public hearing. We'll have questions, if any, by the hearing body, and then discussion by the hearing body. A decision shall be made by the hearing body at the close of the hearing, or the matter will be continued to a date certain in the future. This will be the only notice of that date you will receive. Does anyone have any questions about the procedures of the hearing?
I do, Mr. Mayor.
Yes, sir.
And not to be overly technical, but don't we need to officially consider and have a final decision on whether we're going to have a transient room tax before we adopt it as our fee? No, we had a first reading, didn't we? We haven't had a second reading yet.
Well, sir, that's a good question. I'm going to yield that answer to our Mr. City Attorney.
There was a motion made as part of it, and so the passage of it will take place upon second reading, so you haven't passed it, but you could, in the aftermath here, decide whether or not you want to pass it and earmark whether or not the transient room tax will be whatever the outcome is of the further vote later tonight. And then that way it kind of moves you along.
So basically you're saying that because it's already been voted on and approved and we're halfway through the process, if it's approved here, but then say it is turned down.
Yeah, or it changes.
Then we would just amend this on the second reading.
You could say, and I could just read the future and say if you were so inclined to accept the master fee schedule changes, with the exception of the transient room tax, you could say we approve with the withholding of that category unless and until the second reading passes on the transient room tax.
Mr. Mayor.
Would it be simpler just to
Hold on.
reorder the agenda?
Hold on,
Oh, it's not.
one at a time.
Can I speak?
Don't we actually approve
This portion is just.
It's just the public hearing. We don't approve the fees until after we approve or unapprove
It's
the
actually the
transient room
very
tax.
last item on the
okay.
agenda.
The answer is no, we don't need to do it first.
I purposely
Right.
put it last so you can
The short answer, Tyler, is no.
It's item 8M on your agenda.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Thank you for the mental gymnastics, everyone. We really appreciate it this morning.
all like to say no at once.
Yeah. Okay,
Not that we've been building up.
No.
Public hearing.
all right.
Okay.
We will now move to Julie to handle the public hearing piece. Julie, go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor and councilors. So tonight, we have before you actually a pretty long list of changes from what we normally do. We really made an effort this year to go through and clean up a bunch of fees that maybe we weren't charging or that we really needed to look at what we were charging. So the first major change is the staff rates. Before, what we used to do throughout the document is we would try to calculate staff rates for public works related things, or fleet, or administration. And it's, when you're trying to do like a public records request and give somebody a estimate, it's all based on who does the work. So what we've done is we've simplified it and just said that all staff rates will be step one of whatever position is doing the work times 2, which will cover any fully loaded costs. So we don't have to calculate every single option each year. So that's one of the major changes. In the administration department, there's some cleanup related to audio cassettes. I don't think anybody uses those anymore. Adding USB as an option. We just talked about the transient lodging tax, so I'll move on. The vertical housing tax credit. This is something that the city is now responsible to manage. We will have one participant in this once the Dahlia project is complete. So we needed to get the fees in our schedule since we're responsible now. Police department, and I know this is another item on the agenda. The fees have all changed based on the new structure with the contractor who's going to manage our alarm permits. Planning, some updates to the site and design review, site development plan. Jennifer did a great job going through and updating a lot of the fees to change titles to things that make more sense and mean more to developers. They understand what that language is. Under the cemetery, this is where we did a lot of work this year. We had fees in there that for things that we aren't doing. So we eliminated those. We looked at what we really were doing and what it took to do those tasks. We met with Public Works, with Parks, and the folks who do the administration piece, and really worked out how much time it takes each of their staff. So we've done a lot of changes there. We're hoping next year we're going to really look at the plot prices. That'll be the next half of this review. Transit, we were charging we had a fee in there that it's just too cumbersome to even charge. It doesn't make any sense to do it. Sewer. Sorry. There's a new sampling and analysis fee. The companies that are subject to this testing, we're just billing them for the cost it costs us to have the sampling done. Like I said, Public Works has a ton of updates to it, inspections for construction projects, working in the right-of-way, whether you need a street excavation or not, driveway returns, inspection fees, updates to costs for street trees, and erosion control costs as well. And then the SDCs, we did our annual construction cost index increase of 2.64% to all of them. Okay.
Any questions for Julie?
I do, sir.
Okay.
The Julie or Rick, the new work and right-of-way permit fee without street extraction, would that apply to like Wave and Direct Link if they're just doing line maintenance, or?
Yeah, it would. Wherever there is a need for traffic control, then traffic control plan has to be developed and submitted to Public Works, and we have to opportunity to monitor that, review and approve, and as necessary, make sure that appropriate staff is tasked, not our staff, but appropriate staff is tasked with the management of the traffic in the area that the work's to be performed.
So the key is traffic control.
Yeah, that's really.
If it's van and an orange cone outside my house,
That's really the biggest, yeah.
They're
Yeah,
okay?
That's what we're looking at,
Okay.
is what the impact is. And the application process is something that we haven't charged for before, but it costs us. And if we don't charge the person receiving the service, that means that people that are not benefiting from that service are the ones that are indirectly paying for it. We're trying to make sure that we assign cost to the responsible individual or group.
No, that's great. I didn't realize it was for the ones where cities actually doing work, so I'm fine with that. It's great.
Anything else, sir?
That's good.
No? Okay. Any other comments or questions? Okay.
Well, I was going to ask, how come we didn't explore the cemetery increases yet? Is that we just didn't have enough time since? Okay.
Yeah,
There's so few city-run cemeteries that trying to find comparables is going to take some time.
yeah, and I can provide even a little more background. We have a couple new counselors. In 2015, I believe it's the end of 2015, the time is getting away from me. The person who had, pursuant to a contract for the approximately 17 years prior to 2015, had tendered his resignation and indicated that he would no longer be, I can't think of the proper term for the sexton to our cemetery. The result being that after 17 years, the city found ourselves in a position of having to take over the complete administration, operation, and delivery of services to the cemetery. We were not prepared, and we did our best to continue to provide seamless service, to improve the overall quality and appearance of the cemetery, and then to begin to develop a better understanding of what is entailed in managing a cemetery. We reached out to businesses who have an active involvement in cemetery-type operations, and were unable to identify anybody with an interest or willingness to step in and take over for a retired sexton. And we just finally reached the conclusion that this is a program we're going to be responsible for. And over the last 2 years, we've tried to get our arms around what those responsibilities are. We've taken the extra steps to improve the appearance of the cemetery, to improve a lot of the service that we provide to those persons that are accessing our services, the families of deceased principally. And we're still learning as we go. So I would anticipate we'll have some further changes to you as we continue to refine this service. I wish that we had the perfect answer, but we don't now. We're kind of going by feel. It was a very good question, by the way. As I was reading all the changes myself, I was asking myself the same question and came to that conclusion. So thank you for asking it.
Explanation. Anything else for Julie at this point? Okay. Then I am going to open up the public hearing for testimony on the update to our master fee schedule. Close the public hearing. Any further questions or discussion from the hearing body at all? All right. We'll come back and
Mr. Mayor,
yes, Tyler.
I will just express my opposition to the transient lodging tax, and both in passing it and the rate, but
Okay. Thank you, sir. Duly noted. Bring that back around. Okay. All right, we'll move into the next public hearing this evening. It's annexation 18-01, zone change 18-01, the DuPont property, 2.64 acres located at 2125 Northeast Territorial Place. So, procedure for tonight. The matter before the city council is a request to annex property into the city of Canby. Canby Municipal Code Section 16.84.050 requires the council to conduct a public hearing to evaluate the proposed annexation application and determine the appropriate zoning designation upon annexation. This matter requires a public hearing, and all interested persons in attendance shall be heard on the matter. If you wish to testify on this application, please fill out a yellow public testimony card. At the appropriate time, step forward to the microphone, state your name, address, and interest in the matter. Thank you, sir. Was I not bellowing loud enough?
They weren't picking it up in the back.
Okay. I don't need to start that over, do I? Okay. Those people interested in testifying, please indicate that desire by raising your hands at this time. So if you gave me a yellow card, I should see hands. Perfect. Thank you. You may be limited by time for your presentation. Council President Dale will be keeping time this evening. The applicant will have a total of 15 minutes to speak. The proponents will be allowed 3 minutes each, and the opponents will have 3 minutes each. The applicant will then have 10 minutes for rebuttal. Testimony and evidence must be directed to the applicable criteria listed in the staff report or other criteria in the comprehensive plan or land use regulations which you believe applies to the decision. Failure to raise an issue accompanied by statements or evidence sufficient to afford the decision maker and the parties an opportunity to respond to the issue may preclude appeal to the Land Use Board of Appeals based on that issue. All questions will be directed through the mayor. Any evidence to be considered must be submitted to the hearing body for public access. Conflicts of interest. At this time, I would ask that any member of the hearing body who has a conflict of interest, please indicate the nature and extent of the conflict and whether you intend to participate in or abstain from hearing the present matter. Councilor Smith.
None.
Councilor Parker.
None.
Councilor Hensley.
None, plan to participate.
Councilor Dale.
None, and will participate.
And Councilor Spoon.
None, and I'll participate.
Thank you. Ex parte contact. Also, if any member of the hearing body has any ex parte contact with anyone prior to this hearing, including a visit to the site, please declare the nature and extent of such contact at this time. Councilor Smith?
None other than planning commission meeting.
Councilor Parker?
None other than driving by it.
Councilor Hensley?
None.
Council President Dale?
None.
And Councilor Spoon?
None, with the exception that I regularly drive by that section of town.
Okay. Does any member of the audience have any questions for any councilor or the mayor regarding ex parte contact or conflict of interest? Okay. The public hearing shall or will be conducted as follows. There will be staff report, questions of staff by the hearing body. I will open the public hearing for testimony. We'll hear from the applicant. We will hear from proponents, then opponents. There will be the rebuttal, and I will close the public testimony. Further questions, if any, by the hearing body, and then discussion by the hearing body. A decision shall be made by the council at the close of the hearing, or the matter will be continued to a date certain in the future for further action by this body. This will be the only notice of that date you will receive. The City Council's decision regarding the annexation application is final and will be reflected with a first and second reading of the associated annexation ordinance. Does anyone have any questions about the procedure of the hearing? Okay. Oh, yes, sir. So with any ordinance and annexation pieces that we do, there's a first reading, and then at our next next city council meeting, we do a second reading of that. That's called out for us to do that, and it's just another opportunity for us to, in all honesty, for the body to, you know, if they think about something and they want to change their vote, they're entitled to do that. Joe, is there anything I should elaborate on?
Well, and it's just the process when it's ordinances, it requires a second reading.
So there's no more public input allowed at the second reading, is that correct?
That's correct.
Goes back in history to when people had to travel a long ways to get to a meeting, and they wanted to do it twice so that they could come to the second one if they needed to.
At the second reading.
Yes, sorry,
It's not a
thank you.
public hearing, but
There's not a
input allowed.
hearing at the second reading. You're allowed to come and give, you know, if you want to make a comment about it. There's no, we won't reopen the hearing. There can't be new evidence presented. But if you have a comment to be made, you know, I'll allow a comment to be made. But if it's something new, it's not anything that we can use or hear in our decision-making.
Well, and yeah, the public always has the ability to come in and take their 3 minutes and make a comment at any meeting as well.
Does that help? Okay. Any other questions? It's a great question. No? Okay. Mr. Brown, the floor is yours, sir.
All right, thank you for the intro, and good evening, councilors. This is an annexation and zone change. I'm going to show you a conceptual subdivision layout, but you're not acting on the subdivision tonight, and so we're not holding the applicant to that, although they expect to come back with something very similar to what you'll see. The Planning Commission reviewed this on April 23rd, made a recommendation that the City Council approve this annexation and rezoning request. The slide that you see up here shows the location of the property. Includes a total of 2.64 acres. That includes 2 acres of real property that consists of 2 different tax lots, both owned by DuPont, so we're calling it the DuPont annexation. And then it includes the northern part of the territorial right-of-way, so that's why you see it going down into the territorial. And then there is Spitz Road along the eastern boundary of the property. It used to be an old county road, and it actually is physically there and leads up to towards the river at the northern end where city property exists. There's a tiny little parking area there and a gate that people make their way down along the river and the wayside area. That Spitz Road is part of the annexation. It has actually been vacated, and it's now not really a road, but it's city-owned property, and it was part of the transition of land along the wayside area to the city. Not only Spitz Road, but Territorial Place, that is the outline going back to Territorial further to the west there as well. There was quite a bit of discussion about that from the audience at the Planning Commission meeting. Just the fact that some of the property owners to the west of this proposed annexation weren't really aware that the city owned Spitz Road and Territorial Place. The applicant is proposing to utilize Spitz Road. On this particular drawing, the blue area actually goes on up to this second parcel as well, so don't get confused there. But this shows you the other parcels that are to the west here, the 2 parcels that are part of the annexation, and then Spitz Road is also part of it in Territorial. This is the proposed conceptual subdivision plan that would be coming back at a future date. And what it shows is that through our pre-application process and visiting with all the utility service providers and city staff, we all agreed that the best location for access for the future urbanization of this part of town was really to align it directly across with Vine Street on the south side of Territorial Road. So then that led to the internal public road that's indicated over to the Spitz Road, and proposing that it would end up being a public right-of-way. So they'll take that 40-foot of city-owned property that has the old road bed in it that was a county road, and they'll turn it in and pave a city standard public street considered in this subdivision as a low-volume street. Therefore, the 40-foot of right-of-way is adequate and matches what was currently there. The end of that Spitz Road that connects with Territorial Road up to the current date has been proposed not to be a road, but to curve over to the Vine connection, and it would just be a pedestrian connection on out to Territorial Road at that spot. And of course, we do not need or would allow two roads to be that close together on an arterial street. So that's one reason it wouldn't remain open. There is some potential for this new public street serving the adjacent church property there to the east, because it does abut their tax lot. And so that's a possibility in the future. Again, this shows you the property with Spitz and Territorial as part of the annexation package. And the recommendation from the Planning Commission improves approval of the annexation, approval of the zoning that matches the comprehensive plan, which is the R1 zone district. And in this particular case, our annexation ordinance and the map that's a part of it designates this to be an area for doing a development agreement. And since we don't have the subdivision coming at the same time as the annexation, it's a good idea if there's any areas that we want to assure that the subsequent subdivision plan will conform with, we place it in the development agreement, and that's what we've done in this instance. Agreement that the city is going to allow them to use Spitz Road, which is our city property. So most likely we're going to be a party to the plat that gets filed of record because we're part of the owner that will be making up this proposed subdivision. Agreement to the proposed Vine Street alignment, and some other details are indicated in there about the infrastructure and such. We think that the proposed connection of Vine Street will offer another direction for the road to go in the future there to serve the other three parcels to the west if they should ever decide that they want to annex and redevelop in a more urban fashion as well. So it has some benefit from that standpoint in the future as well. Are there any questions about this application?
Yeah, when you're ready.
I suspect probably a couple, Brian. So just going back through the Planning Commission notes and whatnot, so it sounds like we had a couple of pieces come up, and these may be pieces that we need to capture for later on in terms of how it gets developed, but things about fencing and gateways and things like that, and then the path piece. So that path piece, I just want to understand, we're allowing that path piece there that is Spitz Road, but then it'll curve and then that becomes a roadway down the one side, correct?
Right.
Okay.
Mr. Mayor, can I ask just a quick procedural question on this, just to clarify?
Sure.
We're only talking about a zone change and annexation today, right?
Right.
So fencing and pathways and stuff is not binding, not in stone, totally could change?
There's nothing we're going to say about the subdivision itself is binding tonight.
Better. Okay.
Got some?
Yes.
Brian, can you remind us, this is not under a traditional neighborhood development plan like we've done on the past two
No,
annexations?
the annexation map defines areas that are a development concept plan area and areas that are subject to a development agreement only.
This is strictly the
And
development
there
agreement.
is a difference because one is just any infrastructure-related things that we want to make sure that we agree to, who's putting them in, who's going to have the cost to bear, and a pattern of streets that we want to describe in text, that we want to see that, for instance, we want to see the subdivision have a street that goes through and connects to such, you can put that in the development agreement, but that's less extensive process than an actual adoption of a concept plan for the area, and this is not subject to that.
Very good. What were some of the concerns regarding the city ownership of Spitz Road and Territorial Lane?
They were all dealing with the first major concern was the lack of knowledge on everyone's part, including city staff until recently, that we actually owned Spitz Road, and therefore some of the property owners for many, many years have been unable to get the county to improve the roads when they would call, and they were unable to get any assistance from the city. And from my knowledge, at least for a fairly long time, the city didn't really realize that we had the responsibility for these roads at some staff level. And so some of the property owners have actually been buying and putting gravel in these streets in the past. And so that was mainly the discussion that took place at the Planning Commission meeting. And then there was some discussion related to the proposed subdivision, for instance, at the north end where Spitz Road currently is the pathway to the gate that leads a pathway down to the river that people do utilize, and wanting to know whether that should be dead-ended and not connected so there'd be a route of cars going through this area rather than just staying within the subdivision itself. And so those issues will be discussed as the subdivision comes back as to whether, which way should we go. And, if any of you want to lend your opinions as the subdivision application's made on that, that'd be helpful, because at this point, no one's quite sure how we should deal with the connection issue, because the city-owned property from Spitz to Territorial Place is all connected right now.
Okay, so we will deal with those access and where do people park and things like that on the subdivision plan.
Right, and right now there is, there's really no designated parking lot, and there is a master plan for the Wayside area, and it actually has a parking lot near Territorial Road off to the west in that master plan, not near these 3 tax lots, but down closer around the corner on Territorial Road where the bend is. That's where a parking lot is actually proposed for this park area, not up at the end of this gate.
Okay, very good. And traffic concerns, are they part of this discussion, or are they safe for the subdivision?
With the annexation area, there was what we call a TPR, Traffic Analysis Transportation Planning Rule. All that really does is say that when our transportation plan was adopted, it took into account the future land use of this area as an R1 and the expected density, and accounted for that traffic, and therefore it's in accordance with state law that any rezoning which is associated with the annexation was accounted for in your adopted traffic plan.
Great, so no traffic study was needed,
So
it was administrative.
no other traffic study was really performed for it.
Okay.
It's not a big enough development that it really was, triggered what we normally have as a full analysis. And it's dumping onto an arterial street, which is easily capable of handling the additional traffic.
Thank you, Brian. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
So basically, Brian, here we are with the annexation piece, and there were it meets the criteria based on the annexation guidelines and.
Yeah,
there's
one of the
no
main
thing stands out.
criteria we talk about is, do we need these additional, 9 or 10 lots to meet our 3-year land supply? And the applicant satisfactorily demonstrated that, this is an additional area that fits within that 3-year land supply time frame. And the other criterias are all kind of permutations of will adequate infrastructure be available or built by the subdivider to serve this development. And, that was all demonstrated through the analysis, that it's readily available for extension by the developer to adequately serve the development.
No, I just wanted to hear Brian say, we can do the development agreement here. This is not a case where we're concerned about the creep of very small annexations stacking up, in which case years down the road we go, wow, wish we'd have done a DCT on it.
Yeah, that's why they made the distinction in the annexation map when we adopted the annexation ordinance of which areas needed that piecemeal approach where they wanted an overall concept plan. This was a much smaller area, and apparently at the time they didn't think it was as critical to having that overall concept plan, which would include the other 3 tax lots, basically.
Right, and we're not anticipating then that there would be large annexations there to the north or to the east.
Basically, actually, I'm not sure if I looked at the church property or not. I believe that that's in our urban growth boundary. The 3 parcels to the west are in the urban growth boundary. I believe the church property is as well. And so those are the 4 tax lots that have the possibility of a future annexation.
I just wanted to hear your assurance that the city's not concerned about little tiny piecemeal neighborhoods stacking in there without an overall comprehensive view.
No, and that's why I mentioned the fact we actually kind of looked at it that way in terms of placing Vine Street as the entrance off Territorial and centralized so that it can serve the other areas too.
Okay, thank you, sir.
All right. Thank you, Brian. We'll see if we have anything after the hearing. So I will open up the public hearing and we'll hear from the applicant. Hello, sir. How are you?
Good.
Good.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor Hodgson and councilors. My name is Rick Givens. I'm a planning consultant. I'm here tonight to present the case for Mr. DuPont and his family. The DuPonts are a longtime family in Canby, and you may not know, but they run Willamette Plastics here in town and employ about 25 people. And they've owned this property for about 15 years. As Brian said, when we met at the pre-app to start this process, we went through all of the criteria and talked about what needed to be demonstrated. And we did do the analysis of future need for, like a 3-year supply of building lots in the city. And we got planning data from the Population Research Center at Portland State and did all of the analysis. And it shows that there is a real need for additional lots at the rate at which Canby is growing and has consistently grown over the last 15 years or so. This property is at the edge of the urban growth boundary. I think we can, this is the urban growth boundary line. So there isn't much room for creep, as Council President Dale was concerned about. Basically, you've got the Seventh-day Adventist Church on the one side and 2 property owners that own 3 tax lots on the west side. This property is readily served with existing services from sewer and water that are available in streets abutting the property. And the development of this property would provide for Spitz Road being, reconfigured in a way that would provide better traffic than what's currently there. We heard a lot of concern at the Planning Commission level about, potential through traffic, there being people going around Territorial Place, and obviously we don't want to see that happen any more than the people who came to the meeting did. Very clear tonight that, as Brian mentioned, this is not a subdivision application, it's simply annexation. My clients don't have a specific timeline of when they would start the subdivision process, but we need to first step before they can really get into the details of planning it. But we would agree that some sort of a emergency vehicle gate or something that would close off through traffic would probably be something to look at the development stage. There were also a lot of concern about people who live particularly on the properties to the west, they've been there a long time. It's rural property to their way of thinking about it, and they would prefer not to see any development. It's not consistent with what the Canby Comprehensive Plan calls for. It's intended to be developed to meet the city's population growth, and we believe this is a logical time to start the planning process. We've gone through all of the approval criteria in our narrative, so I'm not going to belabor that tonight. I know there are people who will want to speak, and we'll come back after they're done and give you our analysis and rebuttal. But if there are questions you have about the proposal, I'd be glad to try to address them.
Good.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Yes.
So we'll hear from proponents, and the first one that I have here is Rick Givens.
That was.
Oh, that was you, sorry. All right, then our first opponent to this, Greg Penner. Hello, sir, how are you?
Well, thank you. Good evening. Thank you for hearing us. I live on the west side of that annexation. I'm one of the property owners on that side. And I think some of the other people are going to touch on some of the issues, so I just want to hit something a little different than I'd planned. So one thing that we're very concerned about that wasn't quite covered by what I heard is that there's a lot of traffic that uses that park right now. Dog walkers, bird watchers, joggers, and Spitz Road, as it is right now, is the main entryway into there, with some traffic coming around on Territorial Place. And I haven't heard anything really addressing the idea that those people are still going to want to use the park. And so I understand it Canby Parks is not ready to build that parking lot down the road there, and there's questions about even whether they can because it's county property, even though it's owned by the city. I understand there's some constraints to that. So there's a current usage of that are they envisioning in this subdivision that Spitz Way is going to be a place where cars go to park every day to walk their dogs and such? Territorial Place, as it is right now, is a very undeveloped road that, like he said, we've been maintaining for 20 years, not because we didn't know that it wasn't. We've been asking the city, and they've been saying it's a county road. The county says it's privately maintained. And until we heard at the Planning Commission, that was the first we'd heard, and apparently new to the city, that for the last, since 2004, that's been city property. And so those roads are not that safe to access from Territorial. If you look at that bend there at Territorial, on Territorial Road there, even though it's a 30-mile-an-hour zone, cars come around there pretty quickly. There's a rise there too. So moving that Vine Street closer to the turn there, the rise in the road is maybe a little more visible there, but adding more traffic coming onto the road there is not going to make it safer for people driving through there. Likewise, any more traffic down there on Territorial Place, which is right there in the middle of that turn, where cars have a hard time seeing that road from both ways, is very limited. So we're concerned about that. We are also concerned about our septics and our wells with this new water coming in. We want to make sure that the groundwater is managed in a way that's adequate since that property sits above us. And the water, if it's not properly dealt with, will flow down into our septics, into our wells, into our pasture land. So we're concerned about that as well. There you go. I think that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Penner. Appreciate it. Jay Spillum. Hi, Jay. How are you?
For hearing us also. As I stated in my letter submitted prior to the April 23rd Planning Commission meeting, my family and I have many concerns about the proposed annexation and have been generally opposed to it. I have some references to annexation regulations here. Annexation Regulation 1684 04A 4, 5, and 6, Statement of Availability of Services. I'm concerned about the annexation related to increased traffic on Territorial Road. This development is not that big, but they all add up. I was told recently that the population of Canby is expected to nearly double in 12 years, and the traffic on Territorial Road will be horrendous. Has the City Council considered removing the status of Territorial Road as a truck route to help alleviate the traffic? Do many other cities send trucks winding through neighborhood streets instead of the highway? I also second Clint Coleman's request from the April meeting to reduce the speed limit from 30 to 25 down the hill around the bend. The new entrance of this development may add to the confusion of traffic flow here. We are very concerned about traffic on Territorial Place, as my neighbor Greg Penner mentioned, and agree with the Planning Commission's recommendation to block it off in some fashion, and hopefully add a sign stating resident parking only if possible. Mr. Givens thought it was a good idea also, and stated it was nothing more than a goat path, one that my neighbors and I have been solely maintaining for years, buying and hauling gravel using shovels, wheelbarrows, rakes, picks, as well as our time and sweat. The city would tell us it was county would tell us it was privately maintained, as he mentioned. I read comments from a representative of Curran McLeod Engineering at the August 31st, 2016 pre-application meeting, stating that the spacing between a public road and a driveway was 150 feet. I'm not sure if that's city or county he was referring to. Concerns about the church and Spitz were raised, but not my driveway, which is very close to the new proposed North Vine Street entrance. Should I be concerned when my driveway was there first? I'm very concerned about preserving the quality of our well water and the viability of our septic drain field, which is in the upper yard close to the development. With our well water, will our well water quality suffer? Will my septic drain field be overwhelmed from runoff and cause the water to back up? The neighbors and I we plan on having our wells tested again, we have in the past, before the development and later down the road. If our well or septic systems were determined to be compromised as a result of the development, forcing us to hook up to city sewer and water, I would like to get it in writing that the City Council would waive the hookup fees as a condition of the annexation approval. My neighbors and I have sought legal counsel in these areas and would prefer to avoid that route further if at all possible. In reference to Regulation 1684-04A3, effects on the community, it seems like there will be an increased level of activity, noise, pollution, decreased privacy, and aesthetically pleasing country views in the area. I would like to see a 6-foot wooden fence built along the west side of the development to help retain some sense of privacy on both sides. I also reiterate our desires that the development remain low density and that the number of houses should not increase from the concept plan of 10 total, including the one existing home. Can I take some of my wife's time?
If she's willing to sell the time? So donated, thank you.
Thank you. In reference, I'm sorry, I'm reading so fast. I wrote too much. In reference to annexation regulation 1684005, the background, it says the city charter requires, unless mandated by state law, annexations, delayed annexations, and extensions of city services may only be approved by a majority vote among the electorate. It seems odd that this language is still in there if it is no longer the case. Does the new state exception to this rule also include the required vote on services? The city of West Lynn, where I grew up, still votes on annexations. Is it just up to a decision of the city council? Is there a way to bring the vote back to the people, such as West Lynn? Are you really serving the will of the people here? The majority, is there a way to get the vote back to the people, like through gathering of signatures or something like that for future annexations? I would take an answer with any of my leftover time.
The legislature actually tied our hands
they changed that law. So it took away the municipality's ability to refer it to the people.
How does the city of West Lynn voting?
They can't. No.
The state laws
The
only
only time that Westland would have been able to do that is if it wasn't contiguous, or say, because right now it has to be, one of the parameters is if it's contiguous to existing city, then we have to follow that, House bill, so. If that helps.
Can I tell them what it is? It's Senate Bill 1573, if you want to look at it.
Senate bill, excuse me.
Yeah, because I had to read when I started on council just to figure out how it changed our ability. But if you're interested in looking more into it, it's Senate Bill 1573.
Joe, explain the contiguous part, please.
Okay, so just one of the ways in which the legislature took away our ability to have voter-approved annexations was, one of the criteria is if you're in the urban growth boundary and the lot that you're looking to bring into the city is actually physically touching or contiguous to, right, the already existing city, if it parameters, as long as it meets the other city ordinances and codes, then we let it in. We don't get to send it to the voters, and we don't really get to reject it. So as long as it meets the criteria that was spelled out by, you heard Planning Director Brown talking about kind of needs for R1, and certain proven things.
Does that help with that answer to that question?
Yeah, and looking at the map there, it must count like they're annexing part of Territorial Road also, which is county. Does that space?
Well, do you see where they want to do Pine? All of that is city. So their tax lot actually touches city.
Vine, not Pine.
Or Vine, sorry. Yeah. And technically, the way it works is, territorial it's half county on the north side or east side, however you want to say it, and then the other half is city side. So once you annex in, you're kind of responsible for the big half of the road, and then the other side is responsible for the other half of the road. So that will technically become city as well.
That's where the contiguous part comes in.
I was just curious if the language was still left in there. I guess that's in the background portion, so.
The other items, let me hear what everyone else has to say, and then I'll try to address some of that here at the end.
Okay.
Okay? Thank you, sir. Yeah. Lauren Robertson?
I have anxiety when I speak in public, so.
That's okay, so do I.
We're not public.
Mayor and councilors. I live at 2135 Northeast Territorial Place. I've lived there for 22 years. I just want to let you know that I have worked hard with the Canby Community Garden Association, getting all the community gardens into the city. And, I just want you to know that I tend to lean towards the greater good, and so I want you to know that when I oppose this, it's not coming from a purely selfish place. This finger of property here, it may be technically contiguous, but it is incongruous to the entire element of that part of Canby. It's completely rural. It's a beautiful rural setting. Our old barn is there. You can see it from the whole time you're walking in the park. And plopping 10, 12 houses down in a stream that way is just a finger of urban development that is completely out of context for what I read in the City of Canby's comprehensive plan. It says that Canby will not annex another finger of land in a rural area unless there exists some extremely significant public benefit as a result of this action. So I'm saying that I feel strongly that that falls into that category. The land is in third tier urban growth boundary. It's not first, it's not second, it's third tier. I think it's important to remember that not a single neighbor agrees to this annexation in general. The property up for annexation is not being offered by someone who lives in the neighborhood. This is not his backyard. This is being proposed simply for capital gain, and it's not for the greater good at this time. It may be at some day for Canby, but now is not the time. There are additional factors considering this island of urban development. The annexation will increase burden in the city services, the streets. With no other benefit than 10 new houses, the annex will stand alone. There will be no adjoining properties, which will then take advantage of these improvements. So it makes a very poor choice for development. As neighbors of this property, we do worry for the purity of our well water and for the safety of our septic drain fields and the health and safety of our farm animals. But we worry more that if this finger of property is developed as an annex, in the end, it will look and function as sprawl and not city planning. I feel I must inform you that I have engaged technical and legal representation in this matter, but I would prefer to work with the city with you as an ally in this decision process. We have a few recommendations and requests. If these things were met, if these conditions for annexation were approved and written, then we would be willing to withdraw our objections to the annexation. Would you like to hear the...
At time, if you would, though, if you want to submit that to our city recorder, that will make it into our notes and for us and be part of the record.
Thank you.
Laurel, you have about a minute left for your time. Did you want to take that minute? You certainly can.
I will read one very important thing that was touched on all the way through, and that's the Territorial Place is just a single lane road. It's where my dad walks down to feed his chickens, and it really only connects to Spitz Road because people with trucks continue to insist on driving between the two. So it's huge potholes. It's not even really a road. So what we would request is that Territorial Place be blocked off. I was kind of seeing people use this. Territorial Place be blocked off right about here where our two properties meet, and so that trucks and traffic can't come through, and then it becomes designated as, well, what's the technical term? An access road for just the two properties that are on it. Thank you.
Thank you. Sir, your opportunity for rebuttal.
Thank you. For the record, Rick Givens. Most of these things that were mentioned, I think, relate more to the future development of the property and how that happens. You know, and like I have said in my earlier presentation, we don't object to some of the things that they're concerned about. There was a concern about sight distance at the curve. You know, actually, this is on the other side where you can see around the curve quite well. So I don't think it'd be more of a problem on the other side of Vine. But that's, again, something that gets reviewed at the development application. We'd have to present information. We met site distance requirements. It's the same with septics and wells. The city has a standard about if you're going to put water into the ground, it can't be more than, I think it's about 260 feet or something like that. It has to be at least 260 feet away from a well. So there are rules in place to protect those kinds of things, and we would certainly comply with all of that when we develop the property. Same discussion about fencing, that's again, it's something for the development phase. I think, and I'm sorry, I didn't hear whether it was Lauren Robinson or Robertson, so whichever way, I apologize if I get it wrong. Her comment about it being the finger of urban is, not correct according to the city's comprehensive plan. That whole area over there is designated urban. It may feel rural because that's the way it is, but you have to look at the fact that Seventh-day Adventist Church is an urban church serving Canby. I mean, obviously, it's not there to serve the people who own the 5-acre tracts predominantly. It's there to serve the people in the city of Canby. They presumably don't have any particular reason to annex at this point, but they're an urban use. And these other properties are designated urban, and at some point, it will make economic sense for them to develop. But there is no potential for sprawl here because the urban growth boundary sets the limits, and beyond that, you've got city property, so there isn't any way this is going to generate sprawl. And we have, again, absolutely no objection to and agree with the idea of closing off Territorial Place. And if you want to fit that into the development agreement, we'd be most happy to have it in there. Otherwise, we can just deal with that when we eventually get to the development application. That's all I have. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, sir. If there's nothing further, I'm going to close the public testimony at this time. Mr. Brown, would you like to come back to the table, please, sir? Just, I think, more comments perhaps for you to clarify. So the issues brought up in terms of traffic, the water runoff, wells, septic, et cetera, those are things that will be addressed if and when the DuPonts decide to develop that piece of property and do move forward with 10 homes if this is what they desire, correct?
That is correct, and there's more than one choice in dealing with stormwater runoff. And if they were to choose what we call our underground injections or dry wells, then there is a 267-foot required distance that was decided upon through our submitted master stormwater plan by DEQ that indicated that generally is thought of as to be a safe distance away from any existing water wells. And so they'll have to follow that requirement. If there's an existing water well within that distance, a dry well can't be used. And they'll have to use other surface swales and that kind of solution for stormwater management. As you probably are aware, and certainly anyone that's been watching the Planning Commission for the past 2 years, every item that comes before the Planning Commission is a huge concern about traffic, and so many of them are on Territorial Road. And we continue to do professional traffic engineering studies and have the experts tell us if there's any need for any mitigation, if there's any justification for all-way stops. Reducing speed limit is something that we can handle ourselves if we want to continue to work with the state on lowering certain parts of the roadway for that. And if there's concerns about traffic coming around the curve, that's a legitimate reason for considering those types of things.
Can I ask a quick clarifying since you brought up the speed piece? Did we not just recently lower the speed along
We
there?
certainly did, but I don't think we went the entire distance, or if we did, they're talking a lower speed now.
Lower than what's,
Yeah, they lowered it from, I think, like 40 to, I think it's like 30 now.
30.
so it's 30, and so maybe that
And you have
there's
to
a
go through
request
ODOT for all of that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry, we were talking about that just a second ago, so I just wanted to clarify that piece.
Right, and a traffic study could be required at the stage of a development application coming in that was more extensive than just the TPR analysis that was done. people feel that it's necessary. We have some guidelines, and I certainly have discretion on when I require those and when I don't. And as I mentioned, this one's in a gray area as to whether it's really enough lots to do that. We had a subdivision of approximately 10 lots called Oak Tree. I'm trying to remember the name of it, just off of Territorial, that we actually did have a traffic study performed. It was partly because we wanted to know if it would help to have a connecting street east-west through the subdivision. It helped with that idea.
Clarifying questions or comments for Mr. Brown?
Just make sure that I've got this straight with Brian, because it seems, upon my reflection, a lot of times when we do get annexation requests, it is in companionship with a development plan. But this is a clear two-step process. We're only being asked one question here. And the very act of annexing a piece of land does not prejudice the city into approving any particular development plan. Because what I heard tonight was legitimate concerns about traffic and certainly septic and well, that to have to mitigate a neighbor whose water is leaking into yours is a big deal. But that is something I would expect that we would have a full and robust discussion about during the development phase. What we're presented with here is something a little different. It's only one piece of the question. When I came in tonight, I was expecting much more of the questions along the development lines, but that's not what we're doing here. That as our attorney pointed out, the legislature's pretty much tied our hands and limited the amount of discretion we have with annexation. So I have all of my questions needed for the annexation part, and if and when a development plan comes along, we'll be discussing these other things.
I might mention that we've been doing so many subdivisions and people contemplating annexations. We discuss whether they should bring in the subdivision at the same time as the application, but we don't have anything that requires them to do so, and there's various reasons why they may choose not to do that. A whole bunch of different reasons. They're not ready, they just want to get property annexed, et cetera, et cetera. Sometimes it's even a strategy to break them up. But regardless, most people are willing to share what their current thoughts are on development to help people understand what is likely to happen when an annexation occurs.
Yeah, okay. Thank you, Brian. Appreciate that. Before we move into any discussion pieces here, yeah, again, to Councilor Parker's point, this is a two-step process. This is just the annexation of this land into the city. So a lot of the pieces that were brought up here this evening about the septics and the wells and the traffic pieces, those are pieces that I have no doubt, because Mr. Givens has been in front of us before, so he knows where we stand on these pieces, and I know that he will help his clients take these things into consideration if and when the time comes and they look to develop the land. With the state taking away the voter-approved annexation piece, they at times put us in a box with the law that we have to follow and the criteria that gets laid out. And if they meet the criteria for annexation, there isn't a whole lot of wiggle room for us in that regards, where we really start to get into how we address the issues that you've talked about, preserve some of the livability aspects that you brought up, come about with the design piece. And so, like I said, that will lay at the feet of Mr. Givens and the DuPonts in terms of when they come time to develop those pieces. It's a challenge as a body here when we look at the annexation piece and kind of go, it's double-edged. We hear what you're saying, at the same time, for them as property owners and property rights for them to annex in and do what they want to be able to do on their property, we have to acknowledge that piece as well. So it is not, it can be one of those, we may not like it, but we have to approve it because it meets the criteria. And that's maybe, in some cases like this, that may be where we end up sometimes.
Have we closed the public hearing and we're in deliberation? Because I don't.
No, I did close the public hearing.
Oh, you did? Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Did you have a comment?
Yeah, I do have a comment question. I'm not sure what category it falls under, but I just, in light of Mrs. Robertson's comments about the comprehensive plan, I'm just wondering if it has been done or can be done. Maybe it needs to be looked at. The comprehensive plan dates back to 2007, and this legislation, SB 1573, was in the 2016 session. So I'm just wondering if there's some language in the comprehensive plan that might need to be altered to reflect what we can legally do. Just to keep confusion in the future at bay.
The restriction on, or the requirement for voter approval was actually in the city charter. And I don't believe that the comp plan in any way would have addressed a charter duty that has since been revoked by the state legislature by act of the legislature. But I think relative to the comp plan and its impact on our decision process, your decision process this evening relative to this particular annexation, I don't think it would have relevance other than and you can't do this here because you have to go with what is in the plan now, but other than a total rework of the comp plan that made a determination that this land was not within the urban growth boundary and they're not subject to annexation, and a lot of things would have to happen, none of which as a practical matter and probably as a matter of law could occur with this particular piece of property.
And were you done too?
Yep.
Mr. Mayor,
to the extent that discussing, the comprehensive plan and that kind of stuff is applicable to annexation and zone change that's request, I'll discuss it. But I think we absolutely should not venture forward and push towards amending our comprehensive plan. If you understand and know the difference between the comprehensive plan and our actual development ordinances, they're two different things. The comprehensive plan is how we address the statewide planning goals and how and explains how our ordinances are refined and defined to do that, which I think we're blessed right now to be in a period where the state is not doing mandatory comprehensive plan reviews, gives us more local control and more ability to run and control our own city. And so I absolutely do not think we should be pushing towards a comprehensive plan update or change. If we want to change something, change our ordinances, which is easier, simpler, cheaper, and more in our control to do.
Thanks, sir.
Yep.
I am not an attorney, so I have a question because I'm in light of some of the comments regarding whether or not our comprehensive plan indicates that we would allow a finger. I went to cross-reference Senate Bill 1573, and I'm not an attorney, so I just want some clarification. It appears to me that Senate Bill 1573 says that, well, let me find it again. It's very small. That annexations, the territory is, or upon annexation of the territory into the city will be subject to the acknowledged comprehensive plan of the city. That seems to be a requirement of bypass or a part of how we determine whether or not it's eligible to go to the voters or not. So if there's a theoretical, which I'm still trying to go through the comprehensive plan while I'm here too to figure out where it matches. If there is a conflict between the comprehensive plan and the proposed annexation, does that mean that it's eligible to go to the voters or it's not eligible to go to the voters? Because it sounds to me like in order for 1573 to apply, it's still subject to the comp plan. If the comp plan says we're not going to allow a finger, how is that conflict addressed?
Well, this is, and I know that this has been characterized as a finger. I think that the definition of finger may be different for different people. This is an annexation request of a piece of property that is within the city's urban growth boundary. It has been pursuant to the comprehensive plan, determined to be an appropriate property for future annexation and development, annexation into the city, and development as residential properties. So, and there was no effort, and one of the challenges perhaps is that, again, going back to the definition, there have been efforts, and I've seen the outcome, and they're nasty, where an area will be maybe a street will be annexed in order to be able to reach a physical location where 4 or 5 acres will be grabbed, and so you'll start seeing this disjointed configuration in the land use planning process for a particular jurisdiction. Honestly, and I understand the concern of the residents because they want to enjoy that rural flavor, but within the context of this particular annexation, it's not really a finger, it's an extension of existing property that's already been annexed into the city and developed as residential housing. The extension of which the road that's going across Territorial and the connection to we're connecting it with
Spritz Road, you mean?
Spritz to Vine is a connection and extension at a 4-way intersection of one piece of property or one subdivision to this new proposed subdivision. So there is a continuity and an expectation because it has been included within the urban growth boundary, so it is anticipated for future development, and it does meet the further test of we have to look at available lands for development, and we have to take into consideration all properties, and if they otherwise meet the conditions for annexation as outlined, contiguous to existing city limits, services available to support the proposed annexation should a subdivision application be filed, and the infrastructure needs and requirements for the subdivision, then the boxes are checked, and the annexation becomes almost a ministerial act, if you will.
I have 2 clarification questions there, just to make sure I really understand before we get any further into meat. I know that you're talking about like the continuity of the road and all that, but that's really there's only really continuity if we approve the subdivision. That continuity doesn't exist for the intent of the annexation, right? Because that, like the continuity of Vine is really, that's us talking about the proposed subdivision, not necessarily the annexation. Is that what you're talking about, like continuity across Territorial?
Well, yeah, you have the continuity with an existing subdivision. You also have other properties that are within the urban growth boundaries that are attached to and immediately adjacent to the property proposed for annexation. And the fact that they're not being annexed does not mean that the properties that are proposed for annexation are not consistent with the larger long-term plan as outlined in the comp plan for land use designations within the city's urban growth boundary.
Okay, I just have one more clarification question, because I just want to make sure I understand it.
Absolutely.
So when we're talking about what is or isn't a finger, why do we always devolve to defining one word? But I just want to make sure that I understand that, of course, like nothing, of course a finger is contiguous with other annexed in-city property, because otherwise it would be an island, right? So I guess I'm not sure what the difference between what I think a finger is and what you are, because it couldn't be a finger if it wasn't attached. It would be an island if it wasn't attached. So I guess my question is, what's the difference between what this is and what you would consider a finger to be?
Well, the way I would look at it is how egregious the finger would be, so to speak. I mean, there's no dangerous. There's no danger of the finger getting longer because it's the end of the urban growth boundary. Okay. So really, it's only a couple hundred feet.
Okay, so it's like the idea that it's contained is how you
I
see it
just
to be different.
sometimes when you have a term like that and you look at the spirit of the darn thing, and the spirit of the darn thing I would think would be something that egregiously stretches out and makes an odd shape and you know, no great neighborhood plan. I don't think this fits the definition of the spirit of the finger.
Okay, no, thanks. I'm just trying to clarify so I understand, because I was like, finger is not a word that I've ever tried to figure out exactly what it means before. So let me see what we're talking about. Thank you.
Spirit of the finger.
The spirit of the finger.
Any other questions or discussion on this at this point?
I think I'm good.
No more finger talk?
Nope, okay. Thank you, Mr. Brown. We'll move into resolutions and ordinances.
We need a motion first, right, Mr. Mayor?
Sorry.
I move that we approve the annexation and zone change file ANNZC 1801 pursuant to the recommendation forwarded by the Planning Commission. Page 41.
Yep, thank you.
I'll second.
Motion's been made by Counselor Hensley and seconded by Counselor Smith to approve annexation zone change file ANN/ZC 18-01 pursuant to the recommendation forwarded by the Planning Commission. Any further discussion?
Yeah, I just have a question. Is that where we're at in the agenda? Because I thought we were just doing the public hearing and then that's later in the agenda.
Page 41, there's a motion after the hearing.
Right.
Kim said.
No, but there was a motion after the updated fee schedule too on that page. I just want to
That
make
is
sure,
for the
are we
ordinance.
following the agenda?
That's for the ordinance.
Right, okay.
There's two
Land use
pieces.
hearing is neither a resolution nor an ordinance.
Because I see the annexation down as item I under resolutions and ordinances. I just want to make sure that we're,
We
okay.
have to approve the file and then the ordinance, according to Kim.
Okay.
An annexation.
Okay, so not during the master fee schedule because that's different, but now? Okay, all right. Just making sure.
I can just clarify that because in the master fee schedule, there are other things that need to be adopted in this agenda before, that are on that. So that's why the master fee schedule's at the end.
So then we deal with the annexation again under item I, or we're just doing it all now? We're not dealing it?
We deal with the ordinance for the annexation.
Okay.
Item I.
No, thank you. That's what I need.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, guys. I just want to make sure I know where we are.
So there's a motion and a second.
We have a motion and a second, and we've had clarification. Okay, any other question or comment? Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? That passes 5-0. Now we'll move into resolutions and ordinances.
The first ordinance you have before you is for second reading. It's ordinance 1475. This is authorizing the purchase of 3 vehicles for Canby Area Transit from Creative Bus Sales of Canby, Oregon.
And as indicated, this is a second reading and final adoption. You heard this a couple weeks ago. Contingent upon your approval, our transit department will move forward with the acquisition of the 3 vehicles. Funding is coming from various sources. The city's contribution is less than the state and federal contributions for this project.
Thank you, sir. Any further questions or clarifications? Take a motion, please.
Mr. Mayor, I move that we adopt ordinance 1475, an ordinance authorizing the mayor and city administrator to purchase 3 vehicles for Canby Area Transit from Creative Bus Sales of Canby, Oregon.
Thank you.
Second.
Motion's been made by Counselor Hensley and seconded by Counselor Spoon to approve ordinance 1475, authorizing the purchase of 3 vehicles for Canby Area Transit from Creative Bus Sales of Canby, Oregon. Will roll call vote.
Counselor Smith?
Aye.
Counselor Parker?
Aye.
Counselor Hensley?
Aye.
Counselor Dale?
Aye.
Counselor Spoon?
Aye.
Great, motion carries 5-0.
The next item we have is ordinance 1476. This is establishing a criminal history record check policies concerning applicants for employment, appointed volunteers, contractors, and those employed by contractors with the city, and repealing ordinance 1224. This is also before you for second reading.
You?
Sure. Well, and you saw this at the last meeting as well, but this is way of us having an actual definitive policy, really to capture a little bit more of what we were already doing, which is having background checks done. Now they're done basically by our police department, which makes sense. So it's kind of a in-house use of the background check, and it's for it allows us to make sure and do our due diligence in hiring and also in volunteers, so that we don't have folks that, on a case-by-case basis, put together with in vulnerable situations or in safety situations that otherwise their background might, disqualify them.
And I apologize, that's actually one that I should have been covering. And what Joe said.
What Joe
covered
said.
it well.
Well, we heard a lot about it a couple weeks ago. Mr. Mayor, I move we adopt ordinance 1476, an ordinance establishing criminal history record check policies concerning applicants for employment, appointed volunteers, contractors, and those employed by contractors within the city, and repealing ordinance number 1224.
Thank you.
Second.
Thank you.
These easy ones.
Motion's been made by Councilor Hensley and seconded by Councilor Parker to approve ordinance number 1476, an ordinance establishing criminal history record check policies concerning applicants for employment, appointed volunteers, contractors, and those appointed by contractors with the city, and repealing ordinance 1224. Any other discussion? All those in favor?
Roll call.
Sorry.
Counselor Smith?
Aye.
Counselor Parker?
Aye.
Counselor Hensley?
Aye.
Counselor Dale?
Aye.
Counselor Spoon?
Aye.
Carries 5-0.
The next item we have is ordinance 1477. This is adding chapter 3.50 to the Canby Municipal Code, thereby establishing a transient room tax.
This is also an item that you heard during the last city council meeting. If approved, this ordinance would implement a transient room tax within the city limits of the city of Canby. The tax would be allocated 70% to fund tourism promotion and 30% for related programs, events, and services that would promote and enhance tourism activities within the city of Canby.
Great. Sir? Motion?
Mayor, I move that we adopt ordinance 1477, adding chapter 3.50 to the Canby Municipal Code, thereby establishing a transient room tax.
Sir?
Second.
Motion's been made by Councilor Parker and seconded by Councilor Dale to approve ordinance 1477, adding chapter 3.50 of the Canby Municipal Code, thereby establishing a transient room tax. Any discussion?
I watched last week, so I know how the vote's going to turn out, so. I was actually, the YouTube works fantastic. I was watching,
Don't admit to
while I
watching
was
while
in
you're driving.
a stopped car.
Making that clear.
You were a passenger? Got it. Great.
He's got to watch the right channel, Tyler.
Counselor Smith?
No.
Counselor Parker? Yes. Counselor Hensley?
Aye.
Counselor Dale?
Aye.
Counselor Spoon?
Aye.
Motion carries 4-1.
The next item we have is ordinance 1478. This is authorizing a contract with Eagle Elsner, Inc. in the amount of $758,447 with authorization to expand the work scope to an amount not to exceed $850,000 for construction of Schedule A of the 2018 street resurfacing and slurry seal and declaring an emergency.
Kim?
Mayor, I move adoption of ordinance 1478, an ordinance authorizing the mayor and the city administrator to execute a contract with Eagle Elsner Incorporated in the amount of $758,447 with authorization to expand the work scope to an amount not to exceed $850,000 for construction of Schedule A of the 2018 street resurfacing and slurry seal and declaring an emergency.
Second.
You have in front of you the map showing the work to be done for 2018. I do need to Tip of the hat to Lainey Faust for making it in a readable format, because if you had to look at what I would have put together, you would have been disappointed. So, thank you, Lainey.
Still somewhat of an eye chart,
Very
but
small.
Well, there's a way to make it bigger, but I just don't have that.
Is there going to be a list of streets maybe on the website for neighbors to look at?
Yeah, this is posted on the website. It's much easier to see, and you can expand it.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
thank you, Rick. We appreciate the map. Okay, the motion's been made by Counselor Parker and seconded by Counselor Smith to approve ordinance 1478 authorizing contract with Eagle Elsner Inc. in the amount of $758,447 with authorization to expand the work scope to an amount not to exceed $850,000 for construction of Schedule A of the 2018 street resurfacing and slurry seal and declaring an emergency. Roll call vote.
Counselor Smith?
Yes.
Counselor Parker?
Yes.
Counselor Hensley?
Yes.
Counselor Dale?
Yes.
Counselor Spoon?
Yes.
Motion passes 5-0.
The next item is ordinance 1479. This is amending Canby Municipal Code, Chapter 8.20, pertaining to alarms, and this is also before you for second reading.
Oh, which one?
The alarms.
Oh, yeah. Okay, so PMAM is the company that we researched and figured out was the best offer of the service that we are currently losing by the county's basically stopping this, basically taking care of the false alarm side of alarms on people's, both their commercial and their residential alarms. And so this company, if you recall, is one that promises to capture more of the people who are out of compliance and not actually registering their alarms by going through mostly the companies, because they're a more national company that works with all the alarm companies. And so this was an effort that we felt was going to be not only good at educating folks so that we get false alarms down so that our police time isn't wasted on false alarms, but also a way in which to move forward into the future where we didn't have staff to actually, get people to comply and then actually work with the constant registering and getting people to pay for the registration of the alarms. So we felt that this was a twofer, and that the education piece and getting people to not be falsely, bringing our police out to their residences and their commercial buildings, and at the same time getting a more fair across-the-board compliance with our city as a whole, so that we know where the alarms are and how to better respond when they do actually need us.
And is that fair to say that that's an explanation for both ordinance 1479 and 1480?
It is.
Okay. Then, Mr. Mayor, I move that we adopt ordinance 1479, ordinance amending Chapter 8.20 of the Canby Municipal Code pertaining to alarms.
Thank you.
Second.
Motion's been made by Counselor Hensley and seconded by Counselor Spoon to approve ordinance 1479, amending Canby Municipal Code, Chapter 8.20, pertaining to alarms. Roll call vote.
Counselor Smith?
Aye.
Counselor Parker?
Aye.
Counselor Hensley?
Aye.
Counselor Dale?
Aye.
Counselor Spoon?
Aye.
0.
The next item is ordinance 1480. This is authorizing a contract with PMAM Corporation of Texas to provide alarm program administration and collection services for the city. This is also before you for second reading.
Mr. Mayor, I move we adopt ordinance number 1480, an ordinance authorizing the city of Canby to enter into a contract with PMAM Corporation of Texas to provide alarm program administration and collection services for the city.
Thank you.
Second.
Motion has been made by Counselor Hensley and seconded by Counselor Spoon to approve ordinance 1480, authorizing contract with PMAM Corporation of Texas to provide alarm program administration and collection services for the city. Roll call vote.
Counselor Smith?
Aye.
Counselor Parker?
Aye.
Counselor Hensley?
Aye.
Counselor Dale?
Aye.
Counselor Spoon?
Aye.
sorry, motion passes 5-0.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
The next item we have is ordinance 1481. This is authorizing a contract with Intermountain Slurry Seal, Inc. in the amount of $141,185 with authorization to expand the work scope to an amount not to exceed $200,000 for construction of Schedule B of the 2018 street resurfacing and slurry seal. This is also before you for second reading.
And this is the second part of our street maintenance program for the 2018-19 fiscal year. If you look on the map behind you, which is a lot larger, the yellow identified streets, not the little boxes which are ADA ramp upgrades, but the streets that are identified in yellow are those that are targeted and earmarked for a slurry seal overlay.
Thank you, sir.
All right. Mr. Mayor, I move we adopt ordinance 1481, an ordinance authorizing the mayor and city administrator to execute a contract with Intermountain Slurry Seal Incorporated in the amount of $141,185 with authorization to expand the work scope to an amount not to exceed $200,000 for construction of Schedule B of the 2018 streets resurfacing and slurry seal.
Thank you. Second, please.
Second.
Motion's been made by Counselor Hensley, and again seconded by Counselor Spoon for, to approve ordinance 1481, authorizing contract with Intermountain Slurry Seal Incorporated in the amount of $141,185 with authorization to expand the work scope to an amount not to exceed $200,000 for construction of Schedule B of the 2018 street resurfacing and slurry seal. Roll call vote.
Councillor Smith?
Aye.
Councillor Parker?
Aye.
Councillor Hensley?
Aye.
Councillor Dale?
Aye.
Councillor Spoon?
Aye.
Motion passes 5-0.
And the last ordinance that we have second reading on is ordinance 1482. This is authorizing a contract with Herd Farms for wastewater sludge removal.
And Herd Farms has been providing this service for several years. We periodically do a price check to make sure that that the pricing that we're getting is the most competitive that we can find. We are recommending that you approve ordinance 1482 and allow us to continue our relationship with Herd Farms.
Thank you, Rick.
Mr. Mayor, I move that we adopt ordinance 1482, authorizing the contract with Herd Farms for wastewater sludge removal.
Second.
Motion's been made by Counselor Spoon, seconded by Counselor Hensley to approve ordinance 1482, authorizing contract with Herd Farms for wastewater sludge removal. Roll call vote.
Councillor Smith?
Aye.
Councillor Parker? Councillor Hensley?
Aye.
Councillor Dale?
Aye.
Councillor Spoon?
Aye.
Motion carries 5-0.
The next item we have is ordinance 1483. This is the condensed version of the title. The full title's on page 85 of your packet. This is proclaiming annexation of 2.64 acres of real property, amending the existing county zoning from rural residential farm forest 5 acre to city low density residential for the entire area, and setting the boundaries of the property to be included within the Canby city limits.
Deep breath, Mr. Mayor, you ready?
Oh,
Oh, Tyler, have a question?
no, I wanted to read it off so we could actually
Great.
do the township and range numbers correctly for what's pet peeve of mine. was being an attorney.
Go, Councillor
He's
Smith.
honorated it.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to move to approve ordinance number 1483, an ordinance proclaiming annexation into the city of Canby, Oregon 2.6 acres, including 2.0 acres of real property described as tax lots 200 and 201 of portion of southeast quarter of section 27, township 3 south, range 1 east on the Willamette Meridian, tax map 31 east, township 3 south, range 1 east, section 27, subsections DB, and approximately 0.20 acres of the adjacent Northeast Territorial Road right-of-way, and approximately 0.44 acres of part of tax lots 1500, tax map 31 East, section 27 AD, known as Spitz Road, which is vacated county roadway now owned by the city of Canby, and amending the existing county zoning from rural residential farm forest 5 acres RRF F-5 to city low-density residential R1 for the entire area, and setting the boundaries of the property to be included within the Canby city limits.
Second.
Have it now. Motion's been made by Counselor Smith, seconded by Counselor Hensley. Deep breath. To approve ordinance number 1483, an ordinance proclaiming annexation into the city of Canby, Oregon, 2.64 acres, including 2.0 acres of real property described as tax lots 200 and 201 of portion of southeast 1/4 section 27 T.3S R.1E WM tax map 31E 27 DB and approximately 0.20 acres of adjacent Northeast Territorial Road right-of-way and approximately 0.44 acres of part of tax lot 1500, which is tax map 31E 27 AD, known as Spitz Road, which is vacated county road now owned by the city of Canby, and amending the existing county zoning from rural residential farm forest 5 acres RRFF-5 to city low density residential R-1 for the entire area, and setting the boundaries of the property to be included within the city Canby city limits. Any further conversation or discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Carries 5-0.
The next item is ordinance 1485. This is amending Canby Municipal Code, Chapter 10.04.100 regarding storage and abandoning of vehicles on streets.
And I had mentioned this as part of the communications last meeting. This is an approach to simply add the word park so that a focus for anybody who was trying to interpret this would also realize that it's not just about storing or abandoning your vehicles, but it is actually about leaving them for over, and in this case, the recommendation is to change it from 24 hours to 72 hours in the spirit of fairness so that people could have their cars parked for, say, 3-day weekends without seeking the permission of the police department. So this was an attempt to actually reasonably approach parking and abandoning of vehicles. Of course, if somebody abandons a vehicle on somebody else's property, it could be handled right away through private ownership, but this is about the city rights of way and city streets. And so this was kind of supposed to be a balanced approach, but it's also so that they're moving forward. There was a few issues around town, and it generated some discussion, and so I think it merited us taking out any ambiguity and making sure that our parking ordinance is not only enforceable and unambiguous, but that it references, if you notice, the right ORS, because out of somebody's Scrivener error, it referenced something about meat packing in ORS 619 as opposed to 819, which is the actual state parking ordinance. So this is both a bookkeeping cleanup as well as just trying to be a little bit more clear about what we're doing.
Joe, does this give our citizens a little bit more than clarity in terms then of what's abandoned and what isn't?
Yeah, I mean, they are terms of art, but they're really also colloquialisms too. I mean, people usually know what parking is, and they know what abandonment is. The problem with our parking ordinance heretofore was that storing something, we don't normally think about, we're going to store our car when we leave it on the street. You know, nobody actually says, go stow your car over there for a day or whatever. But that's what the spirit of the thing was. This just takes that out and makes kind of the hybrid of both the way we speak colloquially and also legalese, so that it's less confusing for folks, hopefully, and less confusing even than my explanation of it.
A question for Joe.
Yes, sir.
So, Joe, if I park my vehicle in front of my house and don't drive it for 3 days, do I get one of those nasty iridescent stickers that can't come off even with a razor blade and acetone?
Yes, possibly, in that, I mean, part of this is parking enforcement is still complaint-driven in our town. The hope is that people don't call in a car unless it really doesn't belong. And what I mean by that is part of of our response to parking issues has to do with either good neighbors or bad neighbors. I mean, frankly, and the condition of the car, because if it has no wheels on it and it's sitting there, it's probably not capable of being moved. I mean, that's kind of a clue as well. But mostly this is about, you know, where I'm from originally, Eugene, right? They have a very high incident of recovered stolen vehicles. And the way they do that is people report, oh, this car is parked out in my front of my house and it's been here for a few days. And it turns out that people who run, you know, in a stolen car and then it runs out of gas and they just park it and walk off. That's how you can recover those sorts of things. So there's a good reason to have kind of a robust approach to parking enforcement that gets everybody looking at parked cars, but our purpose is never to go around and chalk everybody every day. The enforcement is really complaint driven. So somebody's going to have to complain that, oh, that car doesn't really belong there.
So the citizen that has a one-car parking driveway and 2 cars and consistently parks in front of the house on the street every night after work isn't in trouble. It's just if it sits there and stays there and never moves.
Correct. If it moves within that time, it's fine.
So I would hope our law enforcement would run the plates and go, yeah, this matches a house here, 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 here.
That's also the thing. We're, you know, a small, dense town, right? Second densest in Oregon or whatever. And so the small footprint that we have and the people that we have and dedicated staff that we have, most things are known around town. So, and most people know where the issues are because, like I say, it's complaint driven. So if the same person always complains about the same person, it's going to get the go out, talk to them, and say, you know, have you moved your car? Can it move? It isn't necessarily that you're going to have the sticker and then 3 days later be towed.
Yeah, I'm just speaking from my past life as an HOA president where parking is tight. And you've always got the neighbor that doesn't like your car being parked on the side of their house,
yeah,
where it spoils the view out their kitchen. And they're constantly calling Carrie. It's been there 3 days. It's been there 2 days.
Yeah.
Tag it.
Well, the nice thing is it actually, before it was 24 hours.
Right.
So, I mean, now it's actually technically a little harder to prove that it's not been moved in that time. So, I mean, this really is about...
It's a tough neighborhood, man,
yeah.
I tell you. They let their dogs run in your yards. They do all kinds of things over there. It's just awful. Okay, no, I just wanted to have that public clarification. I understand where this is targeted for. It's for folks who are abusing parking in neighborhoods and making it really tough on the folks that live there. So, thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Yeah. Any other questions or comments?
No.
I've got comments, but are we in discussion
There's not a
right now?
motion yet.
So there's a motion to be read on page 174 if somebody wants to read it.
Mr. Mayor, I move we adopt ordinance number 1485, an ordinance amending Canby Municipal Code, Chapter 10.04.100 regarding storage or abandoning of vehicles on streets.
Thank you. Second?
Second.
Bueller?
Motion's been made by Councilor Hensley and seconded by Councilor Spoon to approve ordinance number 1485, an ordinance amending Canby Municipal Code, Chapter 10.04.100 regarding storage or abandoning of vehicles on streets, and to come up for second reading on June 6th. Any comments or conversation?
I do. I would suggest that we not approve this right now, that we clean this language up. I don't have any opposition to the creation of an ordinance that covers some sort of 72-hour parking or abandoned vehicles in and of itself, but I do have a problem. This is sort of a hybrid. For one, this covers personal property on the street, which would cover every single basketball hoop in the city. It covers, potentially other personal property that has been stored in the street. If you look at section B, it's entirely about abandoned vehicles, but subsection A, well, actually the caption of the thing is about parking, storage, or abandoning of vehicles. So it's the adding of parking here is greatly expanding what was originally done with this thing with the state statutes on abandoned vehicles. Abandoned vehicles is a special legal term of art that allows you to post on the side of it that you can sell the thing within 15 days of the posting if it's actually an abandoned vehicle, and I don't think that's what we want to have in our city. So I think this could be cleaned up a lot and not be offensive in those, somewhat minute ways, admittedly minute ways, but there's no urgency that I can see on this, and that we could probably clean this up better. And
are there other recommendations to the language, Councilor Smith, that you're?
I don't think we should have parking violations subject to the statute on abandoned vehicles at all. I mean, that would be a recommendation to make those, parking match with it's not an abandoned vehicle. And then to not have personal property be in the parking and vehicle ordinance.
So sorry, help me, lead me to the points that you're making here, Councilor Smith. So in in area, 10.04.100, the parking, storage, or abandonment of vehicles on streets, that heading is?
In the body of
perhaps I could entertain a helpful add. The intent of this is how it exists, except for the red, by the way. But if we said personal property therein, if we added the word therein, then, because what this is attempting to do is, some people store stuff in their car, right? And so you don't want to have to empty out the car before you tow it. So that is the intent of that. So if you wanted to just say personal property therein, then it isn't the basketball hoops and stuff like that. It's just whatever's in the car, so that we don't have to break a window and throw everything out on the sidewalk and then tow the car away. And then the state statute itself, 819, deals with both parked and abandoned cars. And I'll explain the difference a little bit from a law enforcement perspective, is that some people, surprise, perhaps might drive a stolen vehicle, park it really fast, and run off, right? And the neighborhood doesn't want that just sitting there on the street for whatever amount of time, 72 additional hours before then it can be stickered, and then the additional 72 hours to get it out of there. So abandonment is treated differently in this context, just so that you can sticker it right away and follow the chapter, ORS Chapter 819 process, which then allows you to tow it sooner, because you don't want to have to deal with an abandoned car that is clearly abandoned in front of, say, police. And that's one of the ways in which abandonment gets, because how do you know it's abandoned otherwise, frankly? So that's why those two run hand in hand, and they do run hand in hand in 819.
Well, and as I'm sitting here reading this again, right, so A1, no person, form, or corporation shall park, store, or permit to be stored on a street or other public property without the permission of the city police department, a vehicle or personal property. Is that the piece you're talking about, Councilor Smith?
Yeah. Personal property therein is what Joe's suggesting.
So maybe personal property therein for a period of in excess of 72 hours. Does that clean that up enough?
I amend my motion,
that would fix that piece to it. Yeah, that would
Okay.
fix that.
Mr. Mayor, I amend my
Well,
motion.
hang on. I'm not quite there yet. Is there another piece there that you'd?
Yeah, B says, when a vehicle is found in violation of Division A of this section, which includes the parking aspect, the officer responsible for enforcement procedure shall follow the procedures provided in ORS Chapter 819 dealing with the custody, removal, and disposal of abandoned vehicles.
Okay. So,
Well, I think we would want to do like a parking ticket or something other than the state statutes dealing with abandoned vehicles for somebody that's parking in excess of the 72 hours.
So ORS Chapter 819 is.
I haven't read that, I don't know if ever, but I know that abandoned vehicles is a special thing that you can basically post a notice on it and sell it after 15 days.
Well, and you can grab it after 3 days. The thing is, if you get to the point where you sticker a car and nobody's still moving it, and from a practical matter, our code enforcement goes out, she'll knock and talk with people, try to get them to understand they need to make sure and be moving their car. If that doesn't work, she leaves her card and a door hanger usually that says, you know, you need to do this. Then if that doesn't work, then, you know, she goes and chalks the car every day, making sure that it's parked there for the 72 hours in this case. And then when she comes back, if it's still there, nobody's responded, nobody's answered, then you get the sticker in accordance with 819, which says now you have 3 days to wait until you can technically have it towed to the nearest tow yard. We have a tow, we have like 3 different companies that we just call the next one. And so that's the way that works.
Okay, so the way I read that, or based on your explanation then, is it's 3 days, that car sitting there.
Yeah.
Then, well, let's say it's 3 more days of Carrie code enforcement officer visiting the house, and then 3 more days for them to remove it.
Well, yes, because, I mean, if somebody comes out and they say, and this happens every once in a while, I've seen this car there for 20 days, right? Then she's going to try to figure out who's there, and then chalk that becomes your first day. And then she'll come back, and after that 3 days, then she'll sticker it.
So, Councilor Smith, your clarification that you're seeking is that that's too broad or not specific? You want it more specific?
Don't know how to answer your question because that wasn't what I asked for. That wasn't my concern. Broader, more specific. I didn't want a vehicle that's parked too long for 72 hours to be treated as an abandoned vehicle.
If it's parked too long, there's a process of notification.
Mm-hmm.
And by ignoring those notices, then thereby is assumed it's abandonment because they're ignoring the notices?
Well, like I said, the abandonment one is different. If you notice, Section A is 1 and 2. Number 2 deals with abandonment. Abandonment would simply be, the officer would have to know it's abandoned. And knowing it's abandoned usually means that there's an intent by the owner to not ever come back for it. That ends up being the case basically where the officer is following somebody in a pursuit and they park it really fast and run off. Whoops. And then they run the plate and they can't find the owner. And then they have to, leave a car there that it doesn't belong to the neighborhood, doesn't. That's the only time that this sort of thing comes in. But I should also say, not only is this currently the parking ordinance, and it references the wrong chapter in ORS, but our codes that dealing with criminal codes actually do incorporate all of the traffic codes, and they actually do incorporate specifically 819 anyway. So even if we didn't have this, which we currently do, we still actually incorporate 819 in our ordinances anyway. So that is always an option for us. I was just trying to clean up our own particular code.
See, my beef is that we're adding parking to this. Before it was storage and abandoning. And, with all the best intentions of the world of our code enforcement individual, we're writing our city laws here, not necessarily the policies. The policies can change, the strictness and the way in which the code enforcement officer could change over time. And so if we're really wanting this to be in effect, then, we should write what we expect people to follow, is what I say. And this does not say, and B does not say anything, a different treatment for subsection 1 for, parking violations than abandoning. It says subsection B treats all of them as the custody and removal and disposal of abandoned vehicles. So if Joe's right and they're treated, parking is treated differently in chapter 819, we're dictating that they all be treated as abandoned vehicles.
Versus just being a parked vehicle.
And I'm not intimately familiar with 819, but if what Joe just said was right, then we're treating them all as abandoned vehicles.
So you prefer to see a separate ordinance for parking?
I just think this thing could be looked at more and potentially cleaned up. That's all.
So can I just make sure I understand so if it said when a vehicle is found in violation of Division A, subset 2, would that resolve your problem? Is it that it combines 1 and 2?
Yeah.
And 2 is really the part that deals with abandoned vehicles. So if it said when a vehicle is found in violation of Division A, sub 2, then that would clear up your issue with the commingling of parked and abandoned?
I think that would be a Band-Aid, yes. I think this was meant to be storage and abandoning of vehicles, which is obviously a different thing than parking a vehicle. And so now we're trying to add in parking, so it kind of creates a square peg in a round hole for what the other language was before.
Well, the problem was before you couldn't even store a vehicle on the road for more than 24 hours. And whether or not you think of it as parking, that's just parking it for 24 hours. You've stored it there. The other thing you could do is just take out the word at the very end, second to the last word, abandoned vehicles, and just say disposal, custody, removal, and disposal of vehicles. Because our intent isn't to have an abandoned vehicle, sold at auction. We just want to be able to sticker it and remove it if people don't comply after warning upon stickering upon warning.
Yeah, that could work.
Sounds good.
So removal of abandoned works for you, Tyler?
Yeah.
Is that, yeah. I'm comfortable with that.
So correct me if I'm wrong here, group, but to me, the desire here, Joe, was to address, as Counselor Smith said, the storage of vehicles and the abandoning of vehicles, and then determining what the fine line is between those two versus parking.
Well, and herein lies the problem. This is about public streets.
Correct.
And so, not everybody, I guess, has driveways. But if you're going to be parking on the streets, heretofore, you were really only allowed to park your car. You had to move it. And so our intent was when somebody complains and they say, well, I didn't abandon my car, you know what I mean? I left it there on the street, but they were leaving it there, storing it in excess of 24 hours. But I didn't want any ambiguity because the idea of abandonment and storage doesn't, even though the storing for 24 hours, everybody should go bing, bing, bing. If I'm storing something for 24 hours, I've only parked it there for 24 hours. It's the same thing. But this is just out of fairness, basically using the word parking. And then it's trying to clean up and do what the other parts of our code do, which is reference 819. And then I don't mind and would join Counselor Smith in clearing up. He's right, the property therein versus just any old personal property is important. And then so adding the word therein after personal property, and then just removing abandoned vehicles and just saying flat out that the intent here, if anybody has to ever come back to the minutes, is that we're not trying to create a whole bunch of abandoned vehicles for auction. We are not doing that. We're simply trying to get folks to comply and not park their cars forever out in the street.
We just don't want junky streets.
Yeah.
End of the day.
For street cleaning, for,
just livability and appearance of the city.
Correct.
So, comment?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Joe, it seems to me that maybe there's a simpler way than trying to tweak more language to fix what's in front of us.
Mm-hmm.
Why don't we just eliminate the word park and not add it? Because in the title of the ordinance, you've got storage and abandoning. And in the body of it, we're trying to tweak it to add parking when we've already stated here in our conversation that 24 hours is parking, but 72 hours would be storing. So do we really need the word parking? That seems to be the word that's muddy in the waters.
I simply added it for clarification so that people who were arguing about this in the community they could agree on. If it said parking, then certainly I would understand I couldn't park. You see what I mean? Mm-hmm. So it really is just for clarification for the population, even though definition-wise, yeah, storing for more than 24 hours is considered storage.
I realize the intent is clarity, but it seems to be the word that's confusing it to me, but.
Yeah, like if we just left it in the 72 and then.
Just change it to 72, and of course, change chapter 619 to 819. I think that would fix it without having to tweak it further to
Well,
add the word parking. I don't know. Counselor Smith, what do you think?
My concerns were addressed with the changes we suggested, so I'm okay with that. I think that's a good, decent fixes.
I do like what Joe's trying to do. He's trying to clarify that parking or storing, okay, don't argue with me that you're not storing it, you're just parking it. That's what you were trying to do, right?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, trying to, and I get that.
I get that.
Because having talked with our code enforcement officer, you know, there's a distinct difference, but based on the code, it's 24 hours, and she's fielding calls after 48. And so, again, that's why I asked the question. We know that it's clarifying her job and alleviating her, but it's also, my concern too is, are we being clear for our citizens to understand parking, storage, and abandonment?
No, I
And
do
I think
like
with Tyler's changes, or recommended changes, I think we can do that.
Okay. So my next question would be to Kim, I guess. Did you capture the changes, the proposed amendments to the language?
Personal property therein, that word added and abandoned, and the last word of snipper B, section C.
Like that?
Strike.
Okay.
Sarah has a question.
So then I could amend my motion just to say we move to adopt the ordinance as amended. Then the seconder would have to second the amended motion.
I second the amendment motion.
Okay.
So one more quick one for Joe and Tyler.
Okay.
When we say property therein, we haven't unintentionally eliminated trailers, boats, other things that may or may not be vehicles.
Well, we probably have, actually. Yeah.
I know it. It's in the HOA, we went around and around about basketball hoops, right?
Yeah.
Same deal.
Yes. And so,
Wheeled property?
Can we say trailer, you know?
yeah.
Well,
Could
trailers
add
and
in there
boats have
something like
license plates.
licensed.
Yeah, they have license plates.
Do they?
Yeah, boats and trailers have license plates.
Yeah.
That's already
That's a whole
illegal.
nother problem.
Homemade piece of crap.
That's a whole nother issue, though.
See, we just thought something so simple.
I know.
Be taken care of, and here
We
we
thought
go.
this would be the easy one tonight.
So should we table this until we get new language?
Well, we could say, well, it's vehicles. I mean,
A trailer's not a vehicle.
yeah, I know, because it's
A
not.
boat is.
Okay, Mr. Mayor, I withdraw my motion, and I move that we table this till Joe can tweak it some more and bring it back next
Okay.
time.
Well, and that's plenty fine, but just know we're living with this right now is the thing too. So I'll get
But we're
I'll get
trying
the
to
fixes to
wordsmith
you.
it on the fly.
I'll get the fixes to you pretty quickly.
Okay.
Okay, so the motion's been made to table. Everyone
Can
tabling.
I just ask a question so I understand? Does, no, no.
Go ahead.
We do have another ordinance, though, that says that you can't just leave stuff in the street, right? Like, you can't just, like, leave your personal property in the street and, or do we not have?
We do. I'll have to locate it. My head's not there right now. So
Okay.
sorry.
No, that's fine. I just,
Okay. So based on that, so it sounds like we're going to table this. Joe will address vehicles, boats, trailers,
Junk.
Yeah.
Every jalopy imaginable.
and any other accessory items that end up in the street.
Yes.
May cause
Grief.
parking, storage, and abandonment issues.
Except for basketball hoops.
Except for basketball hoops.
I don't like that.
Sports equipment is all.
I was down that side.
You can store your soccer.
I'll argue
Our
with
public
you.
works manager is disagreeing with us.
I don't
shaking
like
her head with a migraine.
And I know why, too. It's just,
Street sweepers.
Yeah, no, I hear you.
Mine is actually not in the street, but a lot of them are.
Every fourth Thursday.
But should,
Well,
but should they
it's
be?
best when they're mobile, so they can be.
All right,
Let's move
so,
on.
Joe, we're gonna pull this for now, based on everyone's consensus piece, we're pulling that, we'll rework some language, bring it back to us, okay. Thank you.
Took longer than
All right.
I know, we need a public
Okay, the
hearing.
next item we have is ordinance 1486. This is authorizing a contract with Canby Excavating Incorporated in the amount of $481,373.30 for construction of the Northeast 11th Place sanitary sewer replacement and off-site storm drainage and declaring an emergency.
Motion, please. Or, sorry, go ahead.
And we did receive,
Where do you go?
4 bids, had 4 bidders on this project. Canby Excavating Incorporated was the low responsible bidder at $481,373 and change. One really exciting aspect of this project is it will allow us to abandon a pump station, which is high maintenance and expensive ongoing upkeep. So we're excited to have you approve this so we can move forward with the program.
And the declaration of emergency is because?
Oh, I do have this. Thank you, Jen. Just for clarity, on item K, ordinance 1486, Northeast 11th Place has been declared an emergency, as we request it be declared as an emergency, to complete, so that we are able to complete the work prior to the adjacent paving contract. This also could allow us to coordinate with the paving contractor to complete the paving on Northeast 11th Place, Northeast 10th Avenue, and the 3 storm drywall locations.
Thank you. Mr. Mayor, I move that we approve ordinance 1486, ordinance authorizing the mayor and city administrator to execute a contract with Canby Excavating Incorporated in the amount of $481,373.30 for construction of the Northeast 11th Place sanitary sewer replacement and off-site storm drainage, and declare an emergency.
Second. Thank you, Greg. Councilor Parker, pardon me. Motion's been made by Councilor Hensley and seconded by Councilor Parker to approve ordinance number 1486, an ordinance authorizing the mayor and city administrator to execute a contract with Canby Excavating, Inc. in the amount of $481,373.30 for construction of the 11th Place sanitary sewer replacement and off-site storm drainage, and declaring an emergency. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Anyone opposed? That carries 5-0.
The next item is ordinance 1487. This is authorizing an amended contract with Kintech Technology Incorporated to continue to provide computer technical services for the city.
And Kintech has been providing service for us for a number of years. We did go out last year and sought proposals to see if there was more competitive pricing for the same services. We found that we were getting a very good deal and would recommend this contract for the 2018-19.
Mr. Mayor, the council nerd moves that we approve ordinance authorizing the city of Canby to enter into an amended contract with Kin Technology, Inc. to continue to provide computer technical services for the city.
Nerd, I'll second that.
And that was ordinance 1487.
I was
omitted
seconding
that.
the council nerd part. I'll also second his motion.
Great, motion's been made by Council President Dale and seconded by Councilor Hensley to approve ordinance 1487, an ordinance authorizing the city of Canby to enter into an amended contract with Kin Technology, Inc. to continue to provide computer technical services for the city, and to come up for second reading on June 6, 2018. Any discussion?
It is a good deal.
It is a good deal. All those in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Passes 5-0.
The last item we have is Resolution 1284. This is setting fees for services and repealing Resolution 1272 and all previous resolutions adopting a master fee schedule.
And we are going back to page 5 on this one. This, of course, was the subject of your earlier public hearing.
Mr. Mayor, I move to adopt Resolution 1284, a resolution of the City Council of the City of Canby, Oregon, setting fees for services and repealing Resolution 1262 and all previous resolutions adopting a master fee schedule.
Thank you.
Second.
Motion's been made by Councilor Spoon and seconded by Council President Dale to adopt Resolution 1284, a resolution of the City Council of the City of Canby, Oregon, setting fees for services and repealing Resolution 1262 and all previous resolutions adopting a master fee schedule. All those in favor?
Aye.
Comments?
Anyone
Oh.
opposed?
Nay.
Sorry, did you want to have a discussion?
I just want
piece?
to, well, I was just going to explain the reason why I'm voting no is because I don't agree with the 6% on the transient room tax.
Nay.
I would guess it's for the same reason.
Sorry. Okay. So
it's 3-2.
motion carries 3-2. Great. Is there any, I don't think we have any new business this evening? New business?
New business. No new
New business?
City administrator business and staff report.
Not this evening.
Great. Second opportunity for citizen input. Lone citizen? No?
He's just saying hi.
They're just waving.
Kim, action review.
You have approved the consent agenda. You've adopted ordinances 1475, 1476, 1477, 1478, 1479, 1480, 1481, and 1482. You've approved ordinances 1483, 1486, and 1487 to come up for second reading on June 6th. Ordinance 1485 will be rewritten and brought back on June 6th. And you've adopted Resolution 1284.
Great. Thank you, Kim. Joe's in exec session this evening.
There's not.
Thank goodness.
And before I take a motion to adjourn, I just want to remind everybody here in the audience and viewing at home, starting July 5th, 2018, City Council meetings will start at 7 p.m., not 7:30. Council, redo your schedules, 7 o'clock, not 7:30. With that, I will take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Can I get a second then?
I'll second.
Okay, all those in favor of adjourning?
Aye.
We're adjourned. Good night, Canby. Thank you.
I was ready to.